The village of Akina had never been more alive. The narrow, winding streets were bursting with activity as vibrant decorations adorned every corner. Brightly colored flowers draped from rooftops, cascading like waterfalls of petals, and the tantalizing aroma of freshly cooked delicacies wafted through the air. Laughter and cheers echoed, and the hum of drums set a steady rhythm to the heart of the festivities. It was no ordinary day. This was the grand wedding of Amora, the village's unparalleled beauty, and Ku, the son of the wealthiest merchant in the region. People of all ages, from wide-eyed children to gray-haired elders, gathered to witness the union that promised to bring prosperity and joy to their community. Beneath a grand tent shimmering with golden accents, Amora sat surrounded by her bridesmaids, a picture of elegance and perfection. Her gown, woven from the finest silks and embroidered with golden thread, glowed softly in the muted light. A sheer veil covered her face, but it couldn't hide her radiant features, the kind that had captivated the entire village. Yet, behind her composed exterior, Amora's heart was a storm of turmoil. Her trembling hands betrayed her nerves, though she smiled weakly as the women around her fussed over her attire. Her stomach ached, not with excitement, but with a pain that had been growing sharper each day. She clutched it gently, attempting to steady herself. "Are you all right, Amora?" one of the bridesmaids asked, her voice laced with concern as she noticed the sheen of sweat on her forehead. "I'm fine," Amora replied quickly, forcing her lips into a tight smile. "Just a little nervous." But it wasn't nerves. For weeks, Amora had felt something strange within her, something alive and twisting, a sensation far too unnatural for her to ignore. She'd told no one, not her mother, not Ku, not even Nana Essie, the wise village healer. A part of her had convinced itself it was normal, that perhaps it was just the growing life in her womb. After all, she was 3 months along with her first child, but the movements inside her felt nothing like a child's kicks. They were serpentine, writhing, and sinister. It all began the night Ku proposed. Beneath a full moon that illuminated the riverbanks in silver light, Amora had experienced a dream that left her breathless with fear. In the dream, she stood alone by the river that snaked through Akina. The air was still, unnervingly so, and her skin prickled with the sensation of being watched. The river, smooth and calm under the moonlight, began to ripple without warning. Slowly, a figure emerged, a frail, ancient woman with long silver hair that glimmered like moonbeams. Her eyes, dark as the void, locked onto Amora. "Beware, child," the woman said, her voice like dry leaves rustling in a storm. "You carry more than life in your womb. You carry a curse." Amora tried to scream, to run, but her body was paralyzed. The woman's voice grew louder, her words echoing off the unseen walls of the dreamscape. "The seed of the river spirit is upon you. It will take what belongs to it on the day you are happiest." The next moment, the old woman vanished, and Amora awoke, drenched in sweat, her heart racing like a frightened bird. Pressing her hand to her stomach, she felt the first stirrings of life, an unsettling confirmation of the prophecy she desperately wanted to forget. But how could she? The woman's words haunted her, a shadow she could not escape. In the weeks following her dream, Amora tried to convince herself it was nothing more than her mind playing tricks on her. But the signs around her told a different story. Birds, usually cheerful companions, began to behave strangely in her presence. Crows gathered on rooftops when she passed, their beady eyes locked onto her as if they were waiting for something. Cats, once affectionate, now hissed and darted away when she approached, while dogs that used to wag their tails at her whim whimpered and kept their distance. It wasn't just animals either. Her stomach betrayed her. The movements within it grew stronger, unnatural, like something alive was slithering under her skin. Desperate for answers, she made her way to Nana Essie's hut early one morning. The healer was known for her knowledge of herbs, ancient lore, and the spiritual forces that the villagers whispered about but rarely invoked. As the old woman examined her, the lines on her face deepened, her expression growing graver by the second. Finally, she spoke. "There is something unnatural inside you, Amora," Nana Essie said, her voice low and firm. "Something that does not belong to this world. I cannot help you. Only the river spirits can lift such a curse." Amora's blood ran cold. The river spirits, she'd heard tales of their power, their unpredictable nature. They were said to be both benevolent and vengeful, depending on the mood in which they were approached. She didn't know whether to believe Nana Essie or dismiss her words as superstitious nonsense, but the heaviness in her heart told her the healer spoke the truth. Amora left the hut with herbal poultices and whispered prayers, but they did nothing to ease her growing unease or the serpentine movements in her belly. When the day of the wedding arrived, the village was alive with anticipation, and Amora did her best to bury her fears beneath a mask of calm. Her gown, pristine and flowing, shimmered in the sunlight as she stepped out of the bridal tent. The villagers erupted into cheers, marveling at her beauty, though she moved unsteadily. Each step she took felt heavier, as if the weight of her secret grew with every passing moment. Pain lanced through her stomach, sharper than it had ever been, but she kept going, clutching at her belly discreetly. Ku stood under the grand baobab tree, beaming with joy as she approached, but when his eyes met hers, his smile faltered. He could see the strain in her face, the faint sheen of sweat on her brow. "Are you all right, Amora?" he whispered as she reached his side. "I'm fine," she managed, her voice weak, "just a little tired." The village chief began the wedding blessings, his deep voice calling upon the ancestors and the spirits to bless their union. The crowd fell silent, reverent, but Amora's attention wavered. The pain in her stomach had become unbearable. Her hands trembled, clutching at her dress. Something inside her shifted, pressing against her insides with a force that stole her breath. Then it happened. A scream tore through her lips, shattering the silence of the ceremony. Amora fell to her knees, her face contorted in agony. The villagers gasped in shock as crimson began to spread across the front of her gown. She doubled over, screaming again, clutching at her stomach as if something was tearing her apart from the inside. The crowd stood frozen in horror, and then they saw it. From beneath the folds of her gown, something long and dark began to emerge. The villagers cried out as a black snake, thick and glistening with scales that gleamed like polished onyx, slithered free from her body. Its red eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, its tongue flicking in and out as it hissed loudly, coiling itself around Amora. The scene was nightmarish, and the villagers were paralyzed with fear. "It's a curse," one of the elders shouted, his voice trembling. Nana Izzy stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "This is no ordinary snake," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "This is the spirit of the river. The prophecy has come to pass." Amora's mother, Abina, collapsed to the ground, sobbing. No, I did everything to protect her. I kept her away from the river. Why is this happening?" The crowd's fear turned to panic as an old woman with silver hair emerged from the shadows. Her presence silenced the chaos, and the villagers recognized her instantly, though none could recall having seen her before. She was the figure from Amora's dream. "The curse was placed on your family generations ago," the old woman declared. "Your ancestors stole a sacred relic from the river, and the spirits demand repayment. A life must be given to lift the curse." Amora's heart sank, but as her mother and the villagers pleaded and panicked, she stepped forward, her voice trembling yet resolute. "I will offer myself," she said, her eyes brimming with tears but filled with determination. "If it means ending this for my family, for my child, I will do it." The old woman studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. Enter the river at midnight. If you survive until dawn, the curse will be lifted. But know this, the spirits do not forgive easily." As the villagers whispered in fear and awe, Amora felt a chill settle over her heart. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back. Midnight descended on the village of Akina, casting a silvery glow over the riverbank. The air was thick with tension as the villagers gathered in hushed silence. Their eyes, wide with both fear and hope, were fixed on Amora, who stood at the water's edge. Her once pristine wedding gown was torn and stained, and her face bore the weariness of a woman who had endured far more than her share of anguish. The old woman with silver hair stood beside her, calm and expressionless, her presence an unsettling reminder of what lay ahead. "The spirits are watching," the old woman said softly. "Do not look back. Keep your eyes forward and your heart steady." Amora nodded, her hands trembling as she took her first step into the icy waters. The river gripped her with a cold that seemed to seep into her very bones, but she moved forward, wading deeper. Behind her, the villagers watched with bated breath, their faces pale in the moonlight. The drums, once so joyous, had fallen silent. The only sound was the rushing of the river, growing louder and more menacing with each step she took. At first, the water was calm, but as Amora ventured further, the surface began to churn. The current swirled around her legs and she felt something brush against her skin, something cold, alive. Her heart raced, but she kept her eyes fixed on the opposite shore. Then the whispers began. Faint at first, like distant echoes, but they grew louder, more insistent, until they sounded like the wails of lost souls. Amora's resolve wavered as ghostly hands rose from the water, grasping at her arms and legs, pulling her down. She thrashed, desperate to free herself, the old woman's words ringing in her mind. "Do not look back." Suddenly, a figure emerged from the water, a tall, gaunt man with eyes like burning coals and a cruel smile. "Why do you struggle?" he sneered. "The river has already claimed you." Amora gritted her teeth, forcing herself to move forward. "You will not take me," she whispered, her voice trembling but defiant. The man laughed hollowly, vanishing as quickly as he had appeared. The river grew wilder, the whispers louder, and Amora felt her strength slipping away. Her vision blurred, her limbs heavy with exhaustion, but just as she felt she could go no further, she saw it, a faint light on the horizon. Dawn was breaking. The river began to calm as the light grew brighter. The ghostly hands released their grip, and the whispers faded into silence. With the last of her strength, Amora stumbled onto the riverbank, collapsing onto solid ground. The villagers erupted into cheers, their voices echoing through the valley. The old woman stepped forward, her face softening with approval. "The spirits have accepted her sacrifice. The curse is lifted." The black snake that had once tormented Amora slithered into the river, disappearing beneath the surface. The villagers watched in awe, their fear giving way to reverence. Hu rushed to Amora's side, pulling her into his arms. "You did it," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You saved us all." Amora, exhausted but victorious, managed a faint smile. "For our future. For our child." In the days that followed, The villagers celebrated not only the lifting of the curse, but the bravery of a woman who had faced unimaginable trials. Amora and Ku were married in a quiet ceremony, surrounded by those who had stood by them. The river, once feared, became a place of reverence and renewal, a symbol of redemption for generations to come. Amora's story became legend, a tale of courage, love, and the power of selflessness. It was the day the bride not only gave birth to a curse, but also overcame it, proving that even the darkest trials can lead to the brightest dawns. Drop down your views in the comments.